My name is Steve Peters, and I'm the founder of baseconsulting.co, an end-to-end supply chain management solutions provider based in the US.
Yeah, this is Paul Weedman, the owner of Victor Group. Our business is to be the eyes and ears of our customers, helping the supply chain in China.
Well, thanks guys for joining this podcast. We have Bojan here today. He's an industrial designer based in Australia with a lot of experience working in China with a lot of different Chinese factories and design agencies. And we also have Paul Weedman from Victor Group. And of course, I'm from Base Consulting. Today, we're going to be talking about the product development from the perspective of a designer, which is a very unique perspective and very important to the process of product development. And just going to be going through some questions here and trying to get a unique perspective from the designer side. So thanks for joining us. The first question here is kind of, a bit of a background from you, Bojan, just in your experience working in China as an industrial designer. And maybe you could just share a brief intro and one of your favorite projects you worked on, whether it worked out or not. I would love to hear from that.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm industrial designer for almost 20 years. I finished architectural bachelor degree, master degree, but never practiced in the field. So industrial design, consumer products, mostly worked on contract based. Well, China was, especially Shenzhen, South China, was very interesting because everything was happening and still is happening there in terms of product development, technologies coming up on the market, and some that will come in the West maybe in 5 years. So I was living in Shenzhen for a couple of years, taking on product design contracts and also helping some startups to develop their products and also to kickstart them, to launch them on Kickstarter or Indiegogo. So I have some experience in that field as well, marketing and organizing campaigns. While I was there, I helped launch 2 big Kickstarters, raising over $4 million. They were 2 3D printers for a foreign startup over there, Kodama. I designed some stuff for those 3D printers, but mostly helped branding them and helping to develop user experience around it.
And that was Trinus, right? The Trinus 3D printer?
Yeah, that was the successful one that delivered. I designed actually modular enclosure for it that was flat packed and shipped with product. It was aluminum extrusion with acrylic panels. It should be, and it ended up being very shipping friendly, very small size when disassembled.
Yeah, it was a great 3D printer. I remember I got one sample and it worked great.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for the 8, that was 2016, I think. It was small printing volume, even for the time, I would say maybe medium range. But I used it when I was back in Europe at home. I used it for several years. It really printed very well. And they kept improving it and changing or updating PCB. They improved it a lot over the time. It just was stuck with fixed bed size. But generally, the user experience, everything was like top notch. I think, honestly, like some of these big brands that exist now came from success of Trinus on Kickstarter, because at some point you had, I don't know what's happening now, but tens of thousands of factories manufacturing clones of mostly Western kits and full 3D printers. So
You should get back to Shenzhen.
Yeah.
This 3D printing business is booming at this stage, and lots of things are going on. And this is the place you should be.
Well, I hear that some of old clients are reaching out, and they're doing very well. It's mostly like service industry. But also I hear, I'm not exploring too much, but also here in Australia, there is like not on that size for sure scale, but also 3D printing service is booming a lot.
What is new in Shenzhen, Paul, like these days in 3D printing? Like what are they innovating? What's like the latest thing? Or what are you seeing?
I'm not really very much in depth into this business, but I do have a couple of people around me. I know the technologies has been evolving. There are definitely a lot of designs, if you talk about the industrial design, in the market. So that's why I'm advising Bojan to come back to China. I also working with Troublemaker. I know this is a very big topic over there as well.
Well, when I was there, I met Steven before, maybe probably 2010 or around then. And I wanted to like explore just to further learn and to get some more, better and bigger projects. So I figured I would go to China. And then I told him, I'm coming to China, to Shenzhen. And he's like, why are you coming to Shenzhen? And he was actually in Shenzhen. I didn't even know, but we worked before that.
Yeah, we met on Upwork, I believe. Like,
yeah,
I think
for sure,
originally. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so when I arrived there, I was like figuring out, should I do full-time work or just, take on projects? As a foreigner, I would get maybe better rates and maybe more attractive projects. At some point, some business owner told me, like, you have to know that Shenzhen alone probably has over 5,000 industrial design agencies, who knows how many tens of thousands of designers. But yeah, still huge market and so many products are being developed.
That brings up kind of the question, like what would you say were the pros and cons of like, working as a designer in Shenzhen, from that kind of designer perspective?
If you are a startup and if you have technology in your product, you will have to live in Shenzhen, in sleep, in factory, that you have to do it. At the time, I know Oculus Rift, they probably just got funded on Kickstarter. So these guys were in Shenzhen, developing, prototyping their VR and stuff. There is so much new tech, new trends happening every day that just exposure to that will give you who knows how many ideas to make a new product, to run new business, to offer, your service from China. That was also very interesting if you are somebody who lives there and can, manage startup, can manage production and so on. As far as design, I think I designed mostly for Chinese clients, but for international market because design style was a bit different from what was trend on Chinese market or Asian market mostly. Lifestyle was nice. You would be busy, co-working spaces everywhere. You are welcome. Most of them will offer even free space for you.
That's very interesting point. In fact, as a designer based in China or in Shenzhen, particularly if you talk about the consumer product versus the designer outside of China, when they still have to bring the product manufactured in these countries. And right. I think an industrial designer like Bojan has a lot of advantages because he, not only knows the style of the market, the cosmetics, the colors or whatever, right? But also one thing, in my opinion, which is very important is to understand the mechanical engineering. That's a missing part of a lot of industrial designers outside of China. They think their idea is great, their design is beautiful, but in a lot of cases it cannot be molded and it cannot be engineered in a way that the mechanics will work properly, right?
Yeah, and there's always been a disconnect between the manufacturer and the designer if they're overseas, right?
Exactly. And that's why I was joking with Bojan that it's time to come back to China again. Because when we talk about the product design review, there is a connection between the industrial design itself and the mechanical design, but there are also other aspects that either is about the availability of the material in mass production and the manufacturing challenges possibly during mass production, and what about the control of the quality, and this has to be considered from the very beginning at the industrial design stage. Agree,
Yeah.
Bojan?
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, very important, aspect of being in China, let's say Shenzhen, is because it's close to Shenzhen. Of course, you have Guangdong, you have Guangzhou, you have Dongguan, Foshan. So all the centers manufacturing different kind of stuff, but they manufacture most of the stuff that comes of Guangdong region from South China. And it's shipped from Shenzhen either or from Hong Kong port. That's it. It doesn't move anywhere else. But prototyping time frames. So, for example, company I work for now, it's not like consumer product design. It's more like custom architecture and public art. But we do a lot of prototypes. So here, we mostly source in Sydney, for example, or Melbourne. But you will wait for a couple of weeks sometimes to get prototype of maybe it's a comparison sample of paint.
And do you know
color.
how long it used to take to create a prototype in Shenzhen?
Yeah, so that's the difference. You go to the
It's
factory.
1 week, and there are multiple
I would
prototyping.
For some stuff
Yeah.
I would go to the factory. I had contact still have in Dongguan. He would, take me to the factory. They already had my drawings, files sent, and I would be there for like half a day, and they would be CNCing a piece of metal that I need to, figure out if the dimensions are right. And from there, if it works, if it's tested, then you go on and you pick CMF samples, right? Finishes, colors. Do they have proper certificates for it to be exported to the Western world? That's it. Within few days you have your prototype in hands and it's ready. Many of these like crowdfunding campaigns that I helped, they benefited from just getting these prototypes that they can make photos and videos with and just kick off their campaign, not waiting for it for weeks. When I was working from Europe, for example, I would be waiting for stuff to be made and then shipped to me. Will it arrive? Will it be damaged? It's probably 3-4 weeks from the day when I order it. So yeah, huge difference.
So beyond the timeline, like what is the main challenge, regarding, moving from CMF to 3D printing to manufacturing? Like what is the main disconnect or challenge?
Yeah, I would say, basically you would 3D print something if it's like basic consumer product without technology in it. You would 3D print it, for example, maybe even in-house, or most of these also working spaces have 3D printers you can use, or services that Paul mentioned that are booming. You can just order it and it's arriving maybe even the same day to your address. To test, so you 3D print it, couple of variations of it, finishes, and then test it. And from there, as Paul mentioned, mechanical part of like product development and just figuring out how it will be molded and tooling is missing totally from even from what I know in unis, in schools. It's not, you don't learn about it. You think it's just generated.
So it goes all the way back to school, that they're not teaching them like the mechanical part of it, because it's a lot more advanced, like to learn compared to just like the design of the shell or the casing.
You would have to have like, of course, basic knowledge of how it functions, how all these, splitting, where do you put your split lines and so on, but optimizing for molding. So whenever I have chance with Chinese or some other, tool maker or manufacturer, I will welcome always their suggestion on optimizing the product. Reduce the wall thickness on this part, you are saving on your cost. It will be lighter product. It will be faster made. Seconds are measured in plastic molding, for example, or even like aluminum injection molding. You want to have it optimized, but also manufactured very fast. So yeah, from that, but I would say, all these contacts are tool makers. They know their stuff. They have 30 years experience. You don't have, barely anyone has so much experience. So that is something that you can't, it's very valuable to have.
Yeah. So one thing Paul and I often talk about, and Paul is always talking about, is kind of like the importance of all the teams talking together from the very beginning to reduce those kind of like issues where, there's a design that can't really be manufactured or molded very easily. And so, that's probably why like Paul's company, they have kind of everybody in one spot to be able to talk back and forth and really get very valuable feedback early on before anything is really started, which is kind of the difference between Victor Group and a lot of other firms. They start that conversation very early. Like most product developers, smaller companies or just individuals that have an idea, inventor, they have an idea in their mind. They get a guy on Fiverr, Upwork to design something, then they take it to the Alibaba supplier and they don't know what's going on. And there's like this huge disconnect. And so the designer wasn't really, informed about like what can actually be manufactured or, the optimized design, for molding and that kind of thing. So
yeah, that's because in between the designers outside of China and the manufacturers or prototyping companies, there is a missing of engineering language during the communication. Lots of salespeople have no engineering background at all. That's where the problem comes. And the other thing why it's important to get the product prototyped in China, in most cases, you can't just get one single round of prototyping. You may get the first round of prototype and you see, okay, the color is not correct. Okay, this material has to be changed or whatever. Then you have to go for the second round, right? Then maybe you find, okay, the function is not working properly. You have to do a minor changes on this and that. You have to go for the third round of prototyping. And this back and forth, it takes a lot of time considering all the
funding. But as a tool, it exists. I don't even know how many millions, tens of millions of users they have, right? Both platforms and some even smaller ones, which is your free exposure, right? That you don't have to pay. You just launch your campaign. I would say that is a tool to be used. And of course, classic, surveys, testing prototypes in environments, having like focus groups. It doesn't cost. Sometimes it's all free,
Yeah.
Even if it's you can do a lot of stuff for free, just with your product in hand, just 3D print of it. So, and it's necessary to have it.
Yeah, so the main point here is kind of just, the more information that you have when you start a project, the better. The more market research you do, the more validation, whether it's on crowdfunding website or otherwise. That's kind of the best way to jumpstart a project with more information.
Yeah,
and
I would, if client that from the beginning of our discussion, if the client doesn't have enough information, you have to provide it, because it is very easy to just misalign from their vision and your vision for it. Of course, you have revisions, you have oversight, but still just time can be wasted if some if things don't align, I'd say.
Right.
Yeah.
And Paul, what kind of tips can you provide for, like, say, Chinese factories that are trying to, create a higher quality product design faster, like what kind of tips would you say would be good for communicating better with designers to kind of bridge that gap of miscommunication?
I think first of all, just as Bojan said, that the owner of the project is supposed to have a very clear strategy, very clear goal of what achievement should be delivered. In a lot of cases, the project owner just change the ideas in the middle of the project, and that brings a lot of hassles to the designers and also the engineering people. And the second thing is they're supposed to understand the market. You can't just, you don't know the market, you don't have a clear goal to ask a designer to create a good product for you. That doesn't work.
Makes sense. Well, thank you both for joining today and sharing your knowledge, and look forward to talking to you guys again.
Thank you.
Yeah,
This
thanks
was
for your
nice.
time. Yeah, good talking to you guys as well.
Yeah.